Hi, my name is Hannah Carmon, and today I will be interviewing my grandfather. The purpose of this interview will be to see not only how our country changed after 9/11, but also to see how air travel changed from the perspective of a pilot.
Hello.
Hi, Bampie.
How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Good.
Good. Thank you so much for helping me out with this. I really appreciate you.
Sure.
Yeah, I really
Glad to do
appreciate it. Okay. Yeah, so I thought this would be really interesting to talk to you about, considering that you were a pilot first. And I don't know very much about the topic, because obviously it was before I was born.
Yes.
Yeah. So how long were you a pilot for?
I was an airline pilot for 30 years.
Mm-hmm.
That's how long I worked for American Airlines.
Okay. And you flew for the Navy before that, correct?
Yes, I flew for the Navy, and then I also flew for the Air National Guard after
Oh,
that.
I didn't know that.
I was a fighter pilot in the Navy and the Air National Guard.
Oh. That's very interesting. So, what made you want to become a pilot overall in the first place?
I really don't know. It always intrigued me, and I had a chance to go to Navy pilot training when I was in college.
Mm-hmm.
And so I enlisted in the Navy between my sophomore and junior year in college. And then I went 2 summers. I went away for officer candidate school. And then when I graduated from college in 70, I went right in the Navy on active duty and went to pilot training.
Oh, that's really cool.
And then I spent 7 years in the Navy on active duty.
Mm-hmm.
And then when I got off active duty, that's when I went to work for the airlines.
Oh. What?
Same year your mother was born.
Oh.
Yeah.
So you were a pilot for a long time then?
Yes.
That is that's a pretty long time. What was it like being a pilot before 9/11 happened?
Oh, it was a really great job. I was very fortunate to have the opportunity. Not everybody does. A lot of it is just the timing of when they're hiring and when they're not hiring at the airlines. But it was really a good job. It was I paid well, but it was rewarding. It was fun. I got to go a lot of places, and I worked with a lot of great people.
I read some things online about how the airlines changed. So, and I read that it didn't used to be that there was a locked door between the cockpit and passengers. Is that true?
It didn't used to be what?
That there was not a door between where the cockpit was and where the cabin was. Is that true?
Long before I started flying, yes, they did not lock the cockpit doors. When I started out, we did have a door in the cockpit, and we would lock the door after we left the gate. But we were pretty casual about it.
Mm-hmm.
Like if we got a long delay on the ground, we would open the door and let passengers come up and, tour the cockpit pretty routinely.
Mm-hmm.
We really weren't prepared for what happened during 9/11. We weren't worried about security, and we should have been.
Oh. Then very different than how it is now, then, because I've never seen the inside of a cockpit.
Things changed dramatically after 9/11, yes. Then they went to, not only did they keep the door locked all the time, but they hardened doors and, big locks, and they had very strict requirements on when you could leave the cockpit or when you could let like a flight attendant in to the cockpit. Things got much stricter then. So, yeah, things changed. The world changed after 9/11, you know.
Mm. What?
It was a... Go ahead.
Oh, sorry. You go first.
Oh, did you have some other questions, or you want me to talk about 9/11 a little?
I have some other questions, but you can talk about 9/11 first.
Well, that was a, pretty traumatic experience for the airline and the airline employees. I was actually, of the American, there was 4 airplanes that were hijacked.
Mm-hmm.
And 2 of them were American Airlines airplanes, and 2 of them were United Airlines airplanes.
Really?
Unfortunately, I knew both of the captains that were on the American Airlines airplanes that were hijacked. One of them, the first one that was hijacked, took off out of Boston. It was a 767, which was a wide-body airplane.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what I was flying at the time. I was a 767 captain.
Mm-hmm.
As a matter of fact, I had a flight scheduled later that day out of Boston.
Oh my goodness.
I was supposed to be the next 767 out of Boston after the hijack. And the captain on that flight was a man by the name of John Oganowski. He got hired after I did American, so he was a little junior to me, but he was really respected, really nice person. As a matter of fact, a little sidelight, he was a farmer. He had a farm up in New Hampshire.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things that he and his wife did is they had this program set up where they brought Cambodian refugees to live on their farm to teach them how to farm in the United States.
Mm-hmm.
And to help them get set up and become citizens here. I mean, that's the kind of guy he was.
Wow.
And the captain out of the Washington flight, the other American flight that was hijacked, took off out of Washington, and his name was Charles Burlingame. He went by the name of Chick Burlingame.
Mm-hmm.
I knew him pretty well too, because he was a Navy fighter pilot at the same time as I was, and I used to, fairly well from the Navy and then from American Airlines. And I had seen him just 2 weeks before that. I had run into him in Los Angeles. We both had flights in there, and I ended up talking to him for a while at the hotel in Los Angeles. And then also, unfortunately, there was a couple in the back of the airplane. It was a retired American captain and his wife, and that I knew pretty well, that I had flown with a lot before he retired. So they were both killed also.
Oh.
His name was Bud Flagg, and he was actually a retired, besides being an airline pilot, he was a retired Navy admiral from the Navy Reserve. So, it was a long day, and I ended up going over the next couple weeks after that, I ended up going to quite a few memorial services because of the pilots I knew and the flight attendants that I knew from Boston that were on the flights. So it was a tough time, And then, of course, they grounded all of the airplanes for, I think it was 3 days. No airplanes flew in the United States at all for 3 days.
Wow.
And then we went back to work with, really changed procedures. And, of course, there was a lot of anxiety by the flight attendants and some of the pilots and everything when we first went back to operating. So it was quite a time. And, it was a very unfortunate thing happened,
Yeah. What was the most major change you saw in American Airlines?
The most major change, you mean in regards to 9/11?
Yeah, you said that there were a lot of changes that happened, even in those 3 days.
Very strict rules about who could have access to the cockpit.
Mm-hmm.
And also, probably the biggest change was in how we were trained to react to hijacking. Before 9/11, there had been a bunch of hijackings back in the early 80s, but they were all political asylum seekers. People had hijacked airplanes to go to Cuba and things like that. And the rules that we were told to operate under is just let them take them where they want to go. Don't oppose anything. Don't, just let them, if they want to go to Cuba, take them to Cuba, get the airplane on the ground, don't antagonize anybody, and then, just kind of be passive. Well, after 9/11, they realized that that was not a good tactic, and we went actually the exact opposite. It was like at all costs, keep people from getting to the cockpit. Never go if there's a hijacking in the back of the airplane, even if they're hurting people. Never go back there. Get the airplane on the ground as fast as possible. So it was a complete change in the tactics that they taught us to use to anti-hijacking procedures, and so that was really the big change. And like you said, they hardened the cockpits so that it's virtually impossible to break into a cockpit now. And like back before hijacking, the flight attendants all had keys to the cockpit door. They would just come into the cockpit, like if they were going to bring us something to eat or a coffee or something. After 9/11, nobody had keys to the cockpit except the pilots.
Oh.
And they put, and even for pilots to get in, there was an electronic cipher lock on the door. You had to have, a secret code and then there was a delay on the door opening, so that the guys in the cockpit, even if somebody had the code and had a key, you could lock the door out any delay or the door would open. So you had time to look through a peephole to see who was there.
Oh.
So it was pretty dramatic changes in security of the cockpits. And then, of course, the big thing is that's when they came up with the no-fly list. The federal government has a no-fly list. Certain people can't get on airplanes. It's when they started really using federal air marshals a lot.
Oh.
Or anonymous flights. They're in the back of the airplane. They're armed, federal agents. Oh, and the other thing is, on the domestic flights, they started to train pilots to carry handguns.
Oh.
It was a voluntary program, but the pilots could sign up and go to federal training. And even today, a lot of pilots have a handgun.
Really?
Yeah, they've got a gun in the cockpit. Sometimes both of them do. Yeah, so that was a big change. They are actually federally deputized. They're federal flight deck officers is what their title is. They have a badge and a handgun issued by the government. So yeah, so there was a lot of big changes. It took a lot of the fun out of it, I'll tell you that. The casual ability to let people be in the cockpit and those kinds of things. But yeah. So anything else?
Yeah, what were what were some duties you had as a pilot regarding the rest of the plane before 9/11? I don't remember if we've talked about this yet.
Basically, the captain, most airplanes just have two pilots now, a captain and a first officer or co-pilot. But the captain's job, which was what I was, you are completely in charge of the airplane from the time you leave. So even before that, I would have to be at work at least an hour before our departure time. I would review the flight plan. The dispatchers down in Dallas would build the flight plan initially with all of exactly how we were going to get to where we're going, how much fuel, how much cargo we were carrying, how many passengers and all that. I would review the preliminary flight plan and either accept it or I would have a discussion with the dispatcher and modify it. And then, we'd go out to the airplane, and one or both of us would pre-flight the airplane. We'd get various systems checks we had to do even before the people got on. And then basically as the captain, you planned until you got back to the terminal at the next destination. And so you're in charge of the flight crew, the cabin crew and back, and if there was any decisions to be made, the captain had to make them. If we were going to, things like if the weather was bad and we were going to divert somewhere, that's the captain's decision. Captain had final decision on maintenance items. If there was a question about some maintenance problem with the airplane, it's the captain's decision whether you were going to take the airplane or not. Pretty much you were in command of the operation. So, we took it kind of took it for granted, but I guess there was a lot of responsibility in it. And like the last airplane I was qualified on, my last 5 years, I was a 777 captain, which is the biggest airplane American flies. And I typically had between 10 and 13 flight attendants and 250 people in the back of the airplane. So it was a big airplane. And that was a worldwide airplane. We flew that all over the world.
Oh.
As a matter of fact, one of the interesting things I did do with the 777 was during the last Gulf War, the airlines leased airplanes to the Air Force to fly troops in and out of the Middle East. And I got to do that for a couple of weeks.
Really?
I flew Army and Marines in and out of Kuwait, where we went primarily. Some from the United States. Sometimes we'd just fly them from Germany. I was based in Frankfurt, Germany a couple times, and we just flew back and forth into the war zone as an Air Force airplane.
Wow.
And that was interesting because we talk about the locked cockpit door and everything. We didn't have the doors locked in the cockpit or anything, and all of the guys in the back of the airplane had guns.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, it'd be like 250 soldiers back there with M16.
Oh my goodness. That's
I wish I had taken a picture. I mean, I remember, I think I did, but I don't have it anymore, of one of the airplanes. I went in the back during the flight, and it's like a giant pile of M16s piled up in the galley.
Oh. That sounds like definitely a sight to see.
Yeah, that was pretty interesting flying, because I got to see, all over the Middle East. And I'd never been there before, so I flew over the pyramids in Egypt and all of that. Well, like I said, I went into Kuwait quite a few times, and I went into Doha, Qatar one time also.
Oh.
Yeah, so it was pretty interesting. Yeah, it was a great job. I was very fortunate to have it. And that was a long time ago now. I've been retired for 12 years.
Oh.
Time flies.
Literally, huh?
And I'll tell you one last fun thing I did. One of the most fun things I ever did is I took your mother to Paris once on a flight that I was flying. I was the captain.
Oh, really?
Yeah,
That's
it was
cool.
really fun. It was one of the most memorable things of my life. Yeah, it was a 3-day trip, so I had like a little over a 24-hour layover in Paris. I was flying out of, out of Boston, on a 767. And there was the load was a little bit light. There was some empty seats, so I took her with me. And we went to the Louvre and Notre Dame and all that stuff. Yeah, it was really fun.
That's incredible.
Yeah, you can ask her about it.
Yeah. That's really humbling that, like, I didn't know that you'd known so many people that were on those planes, and, like, even the captains of those planes. That's, like...
Yeah. You're breaking up a little bit. Let me get a little closer to my Wi-Fi here.
Okay.
Well, anything else you need to know?
I think that about covers it. Well, thank you so much for talking with me about this.